Now,
on News Talk 105.9 WMAL.
O'Connor and Company.
Well, good morning, everybody. I am Andrew Langer in for Larry O'Connor. Today, sitting with me as she does is Julie Gunlock. Good morning, Julie.
Good morning.
I'm always glad to be sitting with Julie because she brings common sense and rationality to a world that is increasingly going mad. Listen, we're going to be joined in this hour later on by KT McFarland to talk about what's going on the ground in Israel. Breaking guest news, Julie. We've got Mary Margaret Ulahan talking about this GW rally that's happening, or that has happened. The video we have from last night, she was on the ground there.
Yeah.
And then we have Susan Ferricchio from the Washington Times to talk about the House Speaker fight. Going to be joined in a couple of minutes by Manda Ervin, who is the founder and president of the Alliance of Iranian Women. And apparently there are Iranians who are protesting their regime and their support of global terrorism. So we're going to learn about that.
That's great.
In the meantime, you know, we still have. Listen, as I've been talking about, you know, we shouldn't be surprised by the incompetent reaction by the Biden administration to what is happening in the Middle East, what is happening in Israel right now. This is almost to be expected, because we can't get our act together here at home when it comes to our own border security. And we've got this situation. Charlie Kirk tweeted this out, and this is from Fox News, that you know, as our borders have become open, right, it's not just about the transformation of American society. It's not just about, you know, the pressures that are put on our infrastructure and our economy, but at its core, border security is about national security, and we seem to be falling down on the job here at home, don't we, Julie?
Yeah, we do. And, you know, I think it's fair to say we have no idea who's coming into our country. And Bill Melugin at Fox has been reporting on this and talking about internal CBP data that reveals that thousands of special interest aliens from mostly Middle Eastern countries have been apprehended by Border Patrol. I was talking to a friend yesterday who sort of poo-pooed this. She dismissed this. She said we should really be focusing on the Middle East and really focusing on Israel. We have an open border.
Right.
It's perfectly fine to look at this, to assess our situation, and to add this to the increasing list of things to be concerned about when you have an open border. I mean, there are many, many things that we're worried about. I remember, you know, the good old days where we were talking about, people with measles coming over the border. Now, who is coming over the border are totally legitimate questions.
And listen, I am going to say this. I've said some complimentary things about him in the past. I've said some critical things about him in the past. But the one thing we don't need is Vivek Ramaswamy trying to distract us from the crisis of the southern border by raising concerns about folks coming across the border from Canada. Listen, I get it. You know, we've got. Listen, we have a shared border with obviously we have a shared border with Canada. Much of it wilderness in nature, but let's not distract ourselves from the real problem here, which is what is happening. I think you and I have talked about this, Julie. I was not someone who was interested in border security issues until I took a trip down to the southern border, and this is probably 15, maybe almost 20 years ago. Was dealing with an issue having to do with public lands, and was driving across the southern border along, I guess it was Interstate 10 at the time. And as we're driving to this national recreation area on this fact-finding mission, I'm just watching people sort of wandering through up to the highway. And I asked the guy who had picked us up, I said, well, what's going on here? He goes, these are illegal immigrants who are just crossing. There's no real border here. There's no real fence here. And they may get picked up by the contractors' buses to take them somewhere to be processed. But otherwise, they can just be picked up by some random car. I mean, it was very scary stuff even then. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. And Bill Melugin is really, again, over at Fox, been doing incredible reporting on this. I said earlier, these special interest I can't remember the phrase, special interest aliens coming over, right? Which I'm sure, some politically correct person would be horrified by. But these special interest aliens, that is a term used by the Border Control. The definition, it refers to people coming from countries that have conditions that favor or harbor terrorism. I mean, my God, look at the numbers over the last 2 years: 538 from Syria, 139 from Yemen, 659 from Iran, 123 from Iraq, more than 6,000 from Afghanistan. I think this is a worthy thing to consider when you have motorized hang gliders landing in Israel and shoot. I mean, why I bring up the motorized hang gliders is, I couldn't have thought that up in my own imagination. They are using sort of, these methods that, again, you can't even sort of make up in your own mind. So I do think this is a real consideration. And meanwhile, we have an open border. We have an administration that doesn't care about the southern border. And we have Congress that can't even figure out a speaker. So we're not in great shape in this country.
And at the same time, by the way, we also know that only 1% of immigrants who've been aliens who've been put in the catch and release program have actually been deported. I mean, that's the thing.
Yeah.
Listen, it is ideology uber alles here. The Democrats have this craven, cynical view of immigration as a way of buttressing flagging political hopes over time. And so they're like, okay, we're just going to open up the border here. We're going to let folks come in. We don't care about the policy implications that are involved. And we certainly don't care about the issues. I mean, this is amazing. These numbers do not include encounters by Customs and Border Protection's Office of Field Operations at ports of entry. It also does not include the numbers who have snuck past agents without detection. Sources say there have been over 1.5 million such gotaways during the Biden administration. This is insane.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. So that's listen, Milton Friedman talked about this. Not about the national security aspects of it, but he said you cannot have unrestricted migration into a country and a massive social welfare state, because that is the surest way to bankrupt a country. And in point of fact, this is what our allies in Europe have been dealing with. This issue of unrestricted migration fundamentally, both putting incredible pressure on the ability to govern these nations, but also fundamentally changing their national characters. That's why you've seen a massive pushback there. We are having this here in America. We have to do something about it. And yet, and I'm sorry, what do the folks in this sort of the national security punditry class, what are they saying? No, they're making threats against sitting senators of the United States. Listen, We'll continue in just a moment, but first, it's 7:15 a.m. WMAL traffic and weather every 10 minutes, first on the 5.
WMAL.
Making sense of the news.
Live
from the Home Paramount Pest Control Studios.
Home Paramount, the leader in pest control since 1939.
Traffic and weather brought to you by Hadid Carpet Cleaning.
It's here. Download the new WMAL app and listen anywhere you go, anytime you want.
Well, we are back. I am Andrew Langer in for Larry O'Connor. Sitting with me, as she does, is Julie Gunlock, my longtime friend and colleague. So glad to be sitting with you, Julie, to help me make sense of the world as we make sense of the world here. Joining us right now is Manda Ervin. She is the founder and president of the Alliance of Iranian Women. She's also the author of The Ladies' Secret Society, History of the Courageous Woman of Iran. And there's lots of discussion. In fact, I will share this, in circles where conservative writers are gathering. There's even discussion there of the role that Iran has played in what has happened and what is happening in Israel. Manda, talk about this and talk about the protests against the Iranian regime.
Yes. Good morning, both Andrew and Julie. I listen to the news and I watch the television and I hear all of these talks about Iranians are doing this, Iranians are committing these crimes, Iranians are against it. It's not Iranians. It's a small group of what we call political Shiaism who have been pushed on Iran since 1977. Iranians hate this regime. If you remember last year, 2-3 months, of Mahsa Amini that they murdered because of loose hijab on her head, and uprising of women, woman life, liberty that became a whole worldwide issue, and but the world does not care. Nobody did anything about this regime. Anyway, but the whole thing is it's the regime. Yes, yeah. Khamenei's, the head of the Hezbollah is Khamenei's nephew. This regime is not Iranian. They come from Anatolia, and that's where Lebanon is, and they have no humanity, these people. Yeah. Iranian, yes, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I wanted to ask you, I love what you're saying here, because I think we had a good example of this weekend when an Iranian football game, the fans protested the Palestinian flag being displayed, and you saw chants, and that was incredibly reassuring and a reminder that really many of the Iranian people are being held hostage by these radicals that are in charge. And that's something that you really want to sort of get through to the American public, that this is the leadership of Iran, not the people.
Yes, the people of Iran have been kept hostage with these people who are not Iranian, and they are very, but yes, football game stopped when somebody put a Palestinian flag up. All of a sudden, people stood up, pointed at the flag, and said, take your Palestinian flag and you know what to do with it. And they kept saying that until that flag was put down. Nice. And then the game began again. But the whole issue is that Iranians and Jews, Israel, go back to Isaiah. If anybody goes to Bible, reads Bible, Isaiah 42:06, 42:1, 42:9, they talk about the Lord has talked about a man comes from the east to save the Jews, and that was the Shah of Iran, Cyrus the Great, whom the Lord called Messiah. And it's Cyrus the Great saved the Jews from slavery when he conquered when he conquered the place. So not Judea, and helped the Jews go back and finance the rebuilding of the temple. The Jews and Iranians have been friends for thousands of years. We have actually a few months ago, Prince Reza Pahlavi and his wife went to Israel. Yeah. Spent 3 days. And we have no problem. Israel and Iran have always been friends. Before this regime came to Iran, Iran and Israel had political and economic relationship. Yeah. All of this mess is because of the mistakes of the politics, because of oil, cheap oil, because of European colonialists and all of this. Otherwise, it has nothing to do between the people of Iran and Israel and the Jews.
We're talking with Manda Ervin. She's the president and founder of the Alliance of Iranian Women and the author of The Lady's Secret History, the history of the courageous women of Iran. We're going to continue this conversation with you, Manda, because, it's one of those things where I am reminded of the book of Nehemiah, which is one of my favorite books of the Bible, in which, again, the Persian emperor sent, I believe it was Artaxerxes, allowed for Nehemiah to go and rebuild the walls around Jerusalem. It's all of you. You're absolutely right. This lengthy history of that empire with the people of Israel. But we have so much more to get to in just a moment. Right now, it's 7:22 here on WM. So, Manda, before we let you go, just tell us, how do folks find out more about your organization, Alliance for Iranian Women?
Yes.
Yeah, just tell us, just before we let you go, tell us about how we find out more about your organization.
Well, our organization is with the Iranian American women. We have gotten together to try to to prove to Americans that we are civilized people. And the history of Iranian women goes to 5,000 years ago.
Yes.
Thousands of years ago from mother gods. Iran is a matriarchal country. It's not patriarchal. Even Farsi language is matriarchal. Everything starts by women. We do learning English or Western languages. I still have problem after 45 years here and being educated in America. I still have problem with he's and she's.
Sure.
Because in Farsi, we do not separate male and female. Everybody is a son, a person, a human. And when you say human, everything in English is connected to man.
Sure.
And but in Farsi language, everybody, there is no gender separation.
Well, listen,
So
Manda,
we are, yes.
we unfortunately we have to leave it there. Thank you so very much for joining us. It's Manda Ervin, the Alliance of Iranian Women. When we come back, KT McFarland is going to tell us what's going on the ground in Israel. I'm Andrew Langer. She's Julie Gunlock. This is O'Connor and Company on WMAL.
WMAL-FM, Woodbridge, Washington, a Cumulus media station.
Making sense of the news.
News Talk 105.9.
Now,
On News Talk 105.9 WMAL.
O'Connor and Company.
Well, good morning, everybody. I am Andrew Langer in for Larry O'Connor today. I am joined by Julie Gunlock, my longtime colleague and good friend, Julie.
Good morning.
We need to talk cooking at some point in time. Not on the show, but at some point we need to talk cooking because I'm having all kinds of adventures these days.
Good.
Listen, we're going to be joined in the next hour by Mary Margaret Ulahan on the GW Students Rally for Palestine, the nonsense that is happening on college campuses. Mary Margaret has been there to witness it. Also, Susan Ferriccio from the Washington Times, because we got a speaker fight going on right now, Julie. I don't know if you're aware of it. You know,
I am. I
but
heard.
listen, I know all of our listeners are. I've been dying to talk to KT McFarland, who's our guest this morning, about what's going on the ground. She was President Trump's Deputy National Security Advisor. She's a board member of the Conservative Political Action Coalition, author of the best-selling book Revolution, Trump, Washington, and We the People. Let me ask you, KT, one of the big criticisms that's happening right now, obviously, our intelligence services miss this, at least that's the narrative right now. But what happened with the Mossad and the Shin Bet? What happened in Israel? How did they miss this thing happening?
You know, nobody knows. And there will certainly be a major investigation once all the dust settles. But the dust may settle. It may not settle for quite some time. My best guess is that they were collecting the data and they just didn't put it together right. They just missed it. You know, that they were internally divided, you know, not unlike we are in the United States today. The national security establishment in Israel was pretty focused on their internal political divisions. And so did they miss this? Did the Biden administration miss this? Because the Biden administration has been very focused on improving relations with Iran, despite Iran's kind of unwillingness to improve relations. And at the same time that the Biden administration, people were sitting down with Iran talking about giving them the $6 billion and getting the American hostages back, we now know from the Wall Street Journal reports, not from what's come out of Washington, but what's come out of the Wall Street Journal in the Middle East, is that Iranian terrorist leaders were sitting down with Hamas and orchestrating this whole thing. So there's a lot to be uncovered, and my guess is that Israel holds together now to just deal with the immediate crisis, but heads will roll afterwards.
KT, there was an interesting interview with Brett Baer and U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken yesterday, where Brett Baer asked him, you know, there was this Iranian prisoner swap for $6 billion. You mentioned the $6 billion. And Brett Baer asked him, you know, why won't you refreeze that money? Because it has not been frozen. And Blinken gave a really poor answer, sort of wobbled here and there. Why is that? Do you think that's on the table? Do you think they're talking about it? Because Blinken was unwilling to definitively make a statement either way.
Yeah, Julie, this is the big question I've got. Why is the Biden administration and the Obama administration before it so in love with Iran? They've had this sort of unrequited love affair with Iran of trying to improve relations, and they've offered olive branch after olive branch to remove the sanctions. We're going to have a deal with you over nuclear weapons. We're going to give you money. We paid you money for hostages. And yet every single time, Iran has just pushed it away and said, no, we're not really that interested in dealing with America.
Yeah.
And so I think that now the Biden administration is sort of stuck. They've been so pro-Iran, so anti-Israel, frankly, that they're now kind of stuck. If they admit that this $6 billion is an issue, then they look like they're complicit or naive. So I think that they're just trying to lawyer their way out of it. You know, if you look at the words they're using, they're very carefully parsing. Well, we weren't sure that Iran was the one helping orchestrate this attack. We're not, no, don't worry about that $6 billion. It's only going to be used for, you know, pregnant women and medicine for children. It's not going to be used for terrorist activities. I just think that the bigger problem the Biden administration did to contribute to Iran's sort of power in the region was to not enforce the sanctions. And as a result, we're not talking $6 billion. We're probably talking, you know, hundreds of billions of dollars that Iran was allowed to sell its oil on the world market.
Yes.
KT, and thank you for mentioning the oil issue, because one of the theories that I've been pushing is that, you know, during the Trump years, when we became not just energy independent, but energy dominant, it allowed the United States to flex a great deal of power in the Middle East, namely, most especially, by getting the Saudis to recognize Israel, which was a huge and unprecedented step. Talk about the role of the Biden administration pulling back on energy dominance around the world and how that plays into the United States' ability to flex its muscle in the Middle East.
Well, Andrew, you've hit on the sort of core issue in the world, across the world. It's not just in the Middle East.
Right.
So when we came in the Trump administration, we understood that because of American energy production with fracking, oil and natural gas, especially at natural gas, that we could become not just energy independent, but energy dominant. And that's a big difference.
Right.
Dominant means we set the global price. We have enough oil and natural gas to sell it to the world and supply the world with energy for hundreds of years. And that was a new thing coming in the Trump administration.
Amazing.
So once that happened, it changed every calculation, because it meant American companies could sell oil for $40 a barrel and make a profit. The Russians, the Iranians, all the bad guys, they needed it above $80, $90 a barrel because it pays for everything else in their government. They don't sell anything else all at once. And so we understood that if you push that price of oil down just by the market forces, supply and demand, all of a sudden the Middle East, the Saudis and the other younger generation of Arab leaders would realize we can't count on oil to feed our people. We got to diversify our economies. We need peace in the Middle East. It would show the Russians, you can't afford to invade anybody. You got to feed your own people. And so we knew that calculation would kind of flip the script on every major conflict zone in the world. And that's what we pursued. Now Biden comes in and says, oh, no, we don't want to have fossil fuels. And so they declare war on American energy. I mean, not Chinese fossil fuels, not that they have any, not anybody else's, but just American. As a result, simple supply and demand. Our production goes down, prices go up, Iran's rich, Iran can support terrorist groups throughout the region, Russia's really rich, Russia can afford to invade Ukraine, and so here we sit.
Yeah, it is incredible. KT, listen, thank you so very much for joining us today.
Pleasure and an honor. Thank you.
It's KT McFarland, the author of Revolution, Trump, Washington, and We the People. We've got so much more coming up, 7:44 on WMA. Well, we are back. I am Andrew Langer, in with Julie Gunlock today on O'Connor and Company. And I you know something, Julie, I'm not going to make the gallows humor joke that I made before about the shocking news of the day. I mean, again, we were talking about this in the first hour, which is we've got a real problem in America of the hot take and folks trying to make things go viral, and it leads to bad outcomes. We've got this situation, and this is not me castigating Ben Shapiro, he's just reporting on it, but we had, you know, you would expect a little bit of thoughtfulness as innocents are being slaughtered, you know, at a music festival, or, you know, babies being literally beheaded, and yet Black Lives Matter issues this statement. And I don't even think that was still a national thing anymore, by the way. Black Lives Matter issues statement in solidarity with the people of Palestine. Black Lives Matter, I'm going to read this verbatim. Black Lives Matter grassroots stands in solidarity with our Palestinian family who are currently resisting 57 years of settler colonialism and apartheid. Now, let's also underscore that this is based on a lie. I mean, that's the other part of the problem is so much of this is based on the false narratives that the leftists, the grifter classes put out there. Hasn't it, Julie?
Yeah, it's not just, look, BLM is, we need to start calling BLM what it is. Yeah, they're grifters.
Yes.
Yeah, they're ridiculous people that lead, and grifters, and they are a terrorist organization. Frankly, BLM, what they did to this country in 2020, and the fact that they put this stuff out, and let's not forget, in the Chicago chapter of BLM, put a hang glider, a motorized hang glider, a paraglider, hang glider, whatever, on their poster. Those hang gliders were used by Hamas to murder innocent people at a music festival, unarmed people at a music festival, and they put a hang glider on their poster. This is an alliance with a terrorist organization. This is a domestic terrorist organization. But I know the Department of Justice is too busy investigating parents and Catholic dads to get involved. But this is a dangerous organization.
Absolutely. And let me be really clear about when we talk about why we're talking about grifters in because of this. So what happens is you get people who know they can make money by spinning people up and making them angry. And this is the central thesis in terms of this Palestinian conflict. You had Yasser Arafat. There have been multiple points in time over the history of the nation of Israel in which there could be some kind of coexistence, peaceful coexistence between folks who declare themselves to be Palestinian. We can get into that history as to whether or not there really is such a thing as the Palestinian people or not. Either way, the reality is that there were people who could see themselves and who knew that they can make huge sums of money. Does this sound familiar in terms of the BLM? Yeah. Huge sums of money by keeping people spun up and keeping a problem going.
Yep.
This is where, whether it's what's happening in Israel or whether it's what's happening in the BLM nationally or in Chicago. And to me, it's no great mystery that the BLM in America is praising the Palestinians. It's 7:53 here on O'Connor and Company, WMAL.